What happened recently during lockdown, we put out various press releases and things to try and get people sort of engaged with the museum while basically nothing was going on. And it has to be said, still nothing is going on, particularly we're not open. But we put out the fact that, you know, we are doing a lot of work behind the scenes. During lockdown, we have sort of, a few of us have come in, some of us have been working from home, and actually the number of bits of software that we've archived and put on the website has gone up recently in quite a big way. And magazines and digital scans of magazines and things like that have all gone up because people are just working from home and just want stuff to do. But one of the things we put out saying, yeah, we need some support. The trouble is with what we do is that we have bitten off way more than we can chew. And we kind of knew that from day one. But, you know, that's no real reason to stop. But, you know, there is a lot to do. We have a huge archive in both hardware and software, and the ephemera and documentation and all sorts of stuff. So, you know, we need to support the business community, basically the companies whose heritage we preserve, to give us a hand and get some of this done. And what's Frontier kindly did was support us with a sponsorship package. So it is sponsorship. It isn't just money that goes in and helps us do X, Y, and Z. They are getting promotion and things like that from it as well. So it's a sponsorship package like any other. It works for us both, hopefully, and hopefully you're going to see a few other things come around from that as well. But as many of you know, David Braben, one of the guys behind Elite back in the day, is the top man there at Frontier, and they're helping us basically to exist as a museum and to get through this and to get things done, but also to, you know, push a bit harder on what we're doing with our preservation work for the video game preservation. Although that title is there to be sexy, it's, you know, people love video games. It's software preservation is the honest thing. It's much wider than just video games. So yeah, I wanted to just sort of have a little bit of time just to talk through what we are trying to do, because actually video game preservation and software preservation is more than just taking a piece of software and digitizing it, because that's what a lot of people think it's all about. And it is an important part of it, don't get me wrong, but it does go a bit further than that. So I brought a couple of things out of the archive to show you, which I think sort of have a bit of comedy value. But it's interesting. It might get you thinking about what preservation is. So one of the things, and if anybody wants to chime in, feel free. I'd love to have an argument about it, because it's, you know, there's different people see these things in different ways. So yeah, video game preservation, software preservation, obviously. One of the big things, and a lot of people don't understand, you guys will because you've done it, especially Dave he's mentioned it before, is when you're preserving software from a floppy disk, from a tape or whatever, you've got to basically assume that this is your one chance to do it. And if you're serious about preserving that, it may mean damage to the actual item that you're preserving. Now, as a museum, that's a little bit of a catch-22, because we're supposed to be preserving these items physically and keeping them in the best condition we can. So should we be knifing the edges of floppy disks, 5.25-inch floppy disks, and taking that disk out to read it? So what we do is full of these sort of issues between what you should do to get to the digital data and what you should do to preserve the item, which is why we keep taking in duplicates of the same stuff, so that we have, you know, two bites of the cherry. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and we have different people here at the museum that have different points of view. The pure preservation, in terms of the museum's world, would look at it and say, well, you need to preserve the item. But the techies are saying, well, actually the item is kind of irrelevant. That's just the container for what's really important. Take Snapper on a disk, say. You know, what's important there really is that game, that code. Whereas what it came in is interesting to see, but you know, you never bought it just for the packaging and what came with it. So we kind of try and go this fine line between the two, but actually taking the disc out of its jacket, cleaning it, everything, it takes a long time, right? There's a lot of time spent doing this sort of stuff the right way. So people don't really realize that how much time goes into getting something that actually is quite, you know, a small part. Now, we rely on the community to do a lot of this. You know, we've played very, very little part, probably 1 or 2 games or something, in yeah, the BBC archive, you know, the Stairway to Hell, that sort of thing. It's been done by the community. You guys have done all of it, and it's amazing. But we have the repository of the physical games, and when one comes up, as Dave said, and I probably need to put some limits on it, you know, people come here and they go through it all and recover that data and make sure that it's digitally preserved. You know, we've got to make sure that's done in the right way as well, but we're really keen to have people do this because actually, you know, the museum has good standing, it's an accredited museum, all the rest of it, great, but actually there's not that many people involved that are actually getting things done. So we need volunteers desperately, either remotely or locally, to come in and help us do this. You know, there are, I think we're just coming up to 13,000 games in the collection, physical games in the collection. And that's, you know, excluding the other software and bits. And, you know, there's a lot to go through. So, yeah, so Frontier have been really good in helping us do a little bit of that. We're going to be doing some more, and that's going to be fleshed out. We haven't actually even met yet, you know, face to face. So later on this year, hopefully we'll meet up and we'll talk about the things that we're going to be doing. But just, you know, one of the things, we have a page on our website. I think if you go into Google and type in video game preservation, you'll find our page. It probably comes up at the top somewhere. And yeah, there's some interesting things because we've got to look at how we used to play these games. And one of the things that goes along with a lot of games and a lot of people's memories of them is things like crack throws and this sort of stuff. Now, people like Hugo need to turn their ears off, you know, because some people might not have played the original copy of that game. And actually their experience of the game is different from somebody maybe that played an original copy, because there might have been a menu on the disc, there might have been some sort of intro sequence that was created by whoever cracked it and things like that. Now, does that need preserving? It's an interesting one. I've got an answer to it. We're kind of doing both. Obviously, we're very much mainly seeking out the original copies of games. But actually, you've got to take into account there was a lot of software done and a lot of hacking done that was, you know, it was creative in its own way. So should they be preserved as well? So I don't know the answer to that, but you know, it's an interesting sort of topic to talk around. Now, I've got some bits and pieces here along those lines that kind of make you might make you smile. So this looks a little bit like a software pack from Superior. I should put it on that camera over there. But as you'll see, it's, you know, badly drawn game there, kind of, which is Overdrive, isn't it? With this tape inside. You know, now we don't preserve that as such, but we do have a few copies of things like that that you might, you know, that we keep in the archive. For any future generations can have a look at it and you know, see what used to happen, because clearly somebody spent quite a bit of time you know, creating that cover, and they're very naughty boys, I, you know, give you that, but I think, you know, going to the extent they did to create that copy is kind of impressive. And then you've got other things. You know, that was a BBC game, so that counts. I'm afraid this, I think it's Commodore 64, so, you know, feel free to shoot me. But they haven't put much effort into the cover on this one. Hypersports, head over heels. But what I find quite amusing about this is the fact that actually when you take the game out of its case and then you unravel the game, actually, it is an original game. So this is Olympic Spectacular for the Commodore 64, but clearly they really didn't think much of it and just created copy over it. So I think that's kind of funny. It doesn't say much for the original software, but kind of funny nonetheless. And the extent that people went to do this. So we have here, this doesn't make a great deal of sense, I'll give you this, but we have the original copy there of Manic Miner. We've got a much better copy than that with his case and everything. But then we have the photocopied sheet with all the colors and things on it. So I'll put that over there, you can see it. So somebody sat there in their maths class and photocopied it and colored in all those different sections so that they could use that to play the game. Now, quite why that is with the original copy, I don't know. Maybe this is the person that actually originated that. So they had the original, but they started making copies to give to all their friends and sell at school. So yeah, kind of a few interesting things that come about when we're getting stuff in that kind of quantity, is going through and finding these little things that kind of make you laugh and remember those days. Because at the end of the day, we've got to remember that the games that were being sold were relatively expensive for quite a number of the kids that were buying them. They had to ask their parents for pocket money to buy them. And when you look at it, in many ways, if you just take the $4.99 it might have been to buy a game at that time. If you look at inflation, that is kind of on a par with buying games for the PS4 now. Or whatever console you're buying for. There is an approximation there. So actually today games have a whole lot more in them than they ever did back in the day. So, you can argue that the games today are a lot more better value than they ever were. To try and support the games industry, little plug there. But then there's things like this. So, we have things like this one come in. This is the industrial manufacture of sulfuric acid. Let's put that one down there. Now, is this a copy? I don't know. I haven't really looked into this one yet, but this is something that's been put aside that we need to look into. I mean, is anybody going to really copy what is probably an educational thing? If we look at the cassette there, it's just got acid and it's got the person's name on it. So I'm thinking that this may well be, an original package. I don't know if that's the right term to use. Certainly a very, very low production run, that's for sure. Maybe a low production run of one. But Andrew Clark in 1982 wrote that software and kind of created a cover for it and everything like that. So these are things that we want to preserve. It's interesting that people were creating, software, games, all sorts of different things. Even this kind of educational stuff is quite interesting to see that they've gone the extent. You can actually see it here inside. There's all the instructions there to load it, and even it says for personal use. Actually, let's just see that. So this program is not protected by copyright, so copies can be made for personal use. So somebody sort of going along the whole lines of open source in some way. So, assuming it's basic. So yeah, there's lots of different things that the museum is sort of working on that score. There is a huge amount of things in the collection. And I've got a few Acornsoft things that, they're vaguely sort of interesting in terms of what it means to preserve this stuff. So we at the museum are primarily associated with the physical collection, trying to keep games and software in the best condition that we can, and make sure they're stored in acid-free boxes in the right kind of way. We have, the games are bagged and tagged, as they say, so they have their reference number. They're put into a bag so that if anybody is getting them out of the archive, it needs to stay like that, so that anything that went with it stays with it. That's really important. It's all too easy to get this stuff out and lose it. So we tend to have items in the archive that stay in the archive, and then handling collection that, well, as it says, people can handle and we can play with on games nights and things like that. So how am I doing for time, by the way? Jason, other Jason or somebody?
Probably we're probably around at time, but if you got a couple more bits, but we got if you got a bit more to say, go for it. I would say.
No, not really. I mean, what I think I would like out of this little segment that has kindly been given to us is to sort of say, if anybody does want to get involved, there is a lot to do, and we'd really appreciate the support. So whether that's something that you can do remotely, there's things we can do with indexing magazines and adding information to software and all that sort of thing. The website has everything on it that we have already archived. There's a lot more to do. If you can help us make that archive better, that's really one of the big things that I want to do right now. Having something on the website, it might be there, it might be a picture of it, it might be the title of it and nothing else. If we can fill in those gaps, it's a time-consuming thing, but it makes this collection so much the better. But otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Jason. Well, I'll just improv it a second on my 2 cents. It's a really monumental effort that the museum takes with the preservation, the archiving, and I've done some of it myself as a volunteer. A lot of volunteers have put a lot of time into just cataloging things and so putting all those details into the database, and it's all available to search for on the website, and it's a great effort, and it's sort of was it called like painting the fourth bridge or something? It never ends. But we get through it and keep going. All right, thanks for your time, Jason. Cheers.
Okay, thank you.